Hi there, my name's Tim Johnson. Just want to talk today about rehab. I was thinking about it earlier on, and I went to rehab. The last time I went to rehab was in 2006, and it was a 3-month residential rehab in Luton, a place called Luton, which is not far from London in England. And the reason I went there because basically at that point in my life, I think it was I'd only really just asked for help, and that's the point of this video as well. It's about asking for help and the courage it takes to sometimes speak to your family or people that can help you, and to share the pain and the torment that you're in, and the shame. Because that's what holds you back most of the time. It's the shame that you're embarrassed to do about the things that you've done and the state that you're in, and you don't really want those that care about you to know about that, which is why addiction's so secretive, and we hide things and hide things from our families. Although deep down, half the time they know anyway what you're doing. But at that point in my life, in 2000, well, I suppose it was about 2004, 2005, things were really getting out of hand, and they'd been out of hand for a long time. But really, I'd been one of those what they call a functioning addict, I suppose, which is what I remember Robin Williams saying, that a functioning addict's like a paraplegic lap dancer. You can do it, but just not very well. I mean, that's about what my life was about, really. It was muddling through, and but things escalated in 2004 and 2005, where to a point where I'd sacrificed everything. I'd sold all my jewelry. I was taking so much opiate and drinking so much that I was in constant stupor, and everyone was getting very concerned about me. And anyway, eventually I managed to ask for help, which does take a lot of guts and a lot of courage. But you'd be surprised how people rally round, and the people that are really your friends, and obviously the people that love you, your family, will rally round and try to help you. I mean, after this all happened, I mean, I threw this back in their faces many times, till eventually, they almost gave up helping. And if you look back at my life story on here, you'll see what sort of happened. But let's back to the subject of rehab. So I'd asked for help, and in England there's a scheme. There are rehabs that obviously are extremely expensive, as there are all over the world, which obviously I couldn't, and our family couldn't afford. And it was discussed amongst the family what would happen, and found this rehab called the Perry Clayman Clinic, which one or two dotted about the country. A man called Perry Clayman had set them up because of his own battle against heroin addiction, and they were basic rehabs. I mean, these places were not palaces, and I'll tell you about that now. But the cost was £5,000, which is still a lot of money. But it was for 3 months, that £5,000. Although you had to find your own money for food whilst you were there. Still, for a rehab, that was exceedingly, reasonable price. When you consider some of the prices that rehabs charge across the world, ridiculous. And as it happens, my nana and my mum had some savings put together, and they said, we'll pay for this if this makes you right, if this helps you, if this heals you. And I went in all guns blazing. 2006 it was when I went in. It was a 3-month residential, so I was going to be leaving my children, who were I think 18 and 16, or 17 and 16 at the time. I can't remember. But they were very vulnerable because they'd seen so much shit from me, and it had almost driven a wedge between us, if you like, and they'd not given up on me, but it had really affected them quite deeply, which I'll never get over myself. I never forgive myself for that, really. And of course my darling wife, who so I had to leave all of that and leave my lifestyle. I knew that I was walking out of my job. But I was committed to going through this 3-month rehab and getting well, and it was a very it was a very strict regime there, let me tell you. They had the main building in the place in Luton, and then sober living houses where you would share with two or three other chaps, same sex obviously, because you weren't allowed. It was mixed sex within the rehab itself, but obviously the living, you weren't allowed to cohabit with any other residents at all, otherwise you'd be thrown straight out, just as you would be if you were tested positive for any substance in your body at all. You would be thrown immediately out. There was no debate about that. That was one of the major, the first rules, which is normal for any rehab, I think. So the sober houses had something called a senior peer in it, which was someone who'd had over sort of 5-6 weeks sobriety, and had gone halfway through their system, and then they were given trust and responsibility to mentor the other 2 or 3 residents in the house, who generally were new residents. And these places were real spit and sawdust, these houses, let me tell you. It was it wasn't a palace by any means, but I went, but I was very, very depressed when I went in there. I was obviously not detoxed. That was the first part of my initiation, if you like. I was still full of drugs, and obviously I wasn't drinking so much at that point, and that all escalated years ahead. But I was full of opioids when I went in. So anyway, after sort of settling in there, you're stripped of absolutely everything. You're not allowed any contact from the outside world. You're not allowed to hold any money. Obviously no mobile phone, no nothing, baby. They search every inch of your belongings and yourself, so that they're totally sure that you're clean of everything. You have no substances boxed away inside you or whatever it is. It was that strict. It was. It really was. And so you're just basically isolated. And then put me on a course of Subutex for a decreasing. So I saw a doctor, and when he found out what I was taking, he designed a level for me to start off, which was 12 milligrams a day, I think, to start with. It was quite high because I was taking so much opiates at that time, and reducing right down over a period of 4 or 5 days. And then cold turkey from that point on. Basically, it went down to like 0.5 milligrams for one day, and then it was like cold turkey. Now, this was a 12-step rehab, and I've not really talked about 12. I mean, I'm really open-minded about anyone that gets sober is a hero in my eyes. Anyway, because the battle is the hardest battle you'll ever face in your life. And at that point, I was extremely. I'd not really delved into a 12-step program before, or what it was all about, and the big book and all the rest of it, but it was based around that. So they strip you, they take everything down to basics. You're responsible for the total cleanliness of your house. You have to make your bed every day, which they check. All these things. They start putting you back into a routine. Clean toilets, which gives you humility, and you're all the, and you have to look. They check that you're washing properly, because we ignore that sometimes in addiction. I certainly did. Shaving, you're looking presentable, your clothes are clean. So basic hygiene. They're banging that into you all the time. Basic hygiene, and 2 or 3 group sessions a day, which got very, very heavy sometimes, because you had to share. You shared around the 12-step program. They were teaching you the steps. You were going through the steps over the whole 3 months you were there. You'd go through the whole 12 steps, and basically, and applying them, and then sharing. And it was harrowing sometimes to hear some of the stories. Put your own issues into perspective. Because a lot of the guys in there and girls had come from prison. That's the sort of place it was. They'd gone through the courts, and the courts had given them an option to either go into rehab or serve their sentence. So they obviously had serious issues around drugs and alcohol, so they went into the rehab. So some of them weren't perhaps as committed as others. But I have to say that 12 weeks, I built some friendships that are still constant in my life now, and it taught me a hell of a lot. The guy that ran it, Bill, and his partner Dennis, they'd both been through the prison systems. He was a serious injecting heroin addict for 20 odd years of his life, living on the streets most of the time. And he got through all of that to run this rehab. And at the time I was there, he had about 13, 14 years clean, I think. The man was he was someone I really looked up to. I looked up to all the counsellors there who'd obviously all been addict or all were addicts. And, it was a tight knit team there. And the friendships I made in the houses, Martin, Giles, I use the phrase "just hold on" all the time, which is what Giles taught me, and it's still in my life now. And I look back at all the lessons that place taught me. And yes, there are parts of the 12-step program. I'm really open-minded, in as much as that when I came out of that rehab, I was probably clean for about 2 or 3 months. But I look back now, and obviously it just wasn't right for me at the time, and I didn't really want it enough, to be honest with you. I hadn't dealt with any of the issues that I'd gone in there with, which I talk about in a lot of my videos. I hadn't dealt with any of those back issues, and I hadn't properly, I touched on them, but not dealt with them. I'd made a beginning, if you like. I'd sought help. It had taught me a lot. I'd come out, but I did relapse 3 months later, terribly. And it all went to shit from then on, really, for the next few years. And if you look back at my life story videos on this channel, it tells it in more detail. I won't go into all that now, but it tells it in more details up to this recovery point now, 2 years into sobriety, well, 2 years in the next couple of weeks into sobriety. And but I look back at rehab. The question is it worth going to rehab? And the answer is, if you can get in there, it will certainly. And some people remain clean for the rest of their lives after having done it. Other people don't. It depends if you deal with those back issues. If the 12-step program suits you, there are rehabs that don't do 12-step programs that concentrate, because the rehab, the Perry Claimant Clinic, also did lots of other stuff: acupuncture, yoga, healthy diet, lectures, clean living, exercise. There was all sorts of stuff they pumped into me there, which I relate to now, that I use in my recovery now, which were valuable tools that they taught me. I look back now that I didn't see at the time. But the 12-step thing, although I'm, each to their own, I'm delighted that anyone that uses it and gets well and stays well through it and goes to meetings, because we had to attend 90 meetings in 90 days at that rehab. We went out and attended meetings within the community. And I learned a lot and made a lot of friends, but it just wasn't right for me. And as much as, I couldn't stay sober with it, I just hadn't dealt with those back issues. That's all I really want to talk about today. I just want a quick mention about humility. I was outside watching over here. I don't know, you had the blood moon in England on Friday night, the 27th, and it was the full moon, the blood moon. Incredible moon. But over here it was I don't know if it was the same, but it was a solar eclipse, lunar eclipse, where obviously the sun covered the moon, and it was the energy was amazing. And I sat on my balcony and watched it, and I was thinking, we're in a galaxy, watching the grandeur of this. We're in a galaxy here of in our little galaxy, our little speck that we are, billions of planets in our billions of stars in our galaxy. And we're part of a minimum of 2 trillion different galaxies in the universe alone. 2 trillion different galaxies. Just how insignificant everything is, all the problems that we have are, because it just gives you a little sense of humility. It makes the material world not quite seem so important. When I looked up at that moon, I just thought, it's just great to be alive and experience this. And it gave me a real sense of humility. And in recovery, you need humility. Anyhow, that's enough from me. Don't be afraid to ask for help. That's another, please, you need help and you need support to get sober and stay sober. There's no doubt about that. It's been a valuable part of my recovery this time. And whether that help is a 12-step program, or whether it's in going to meetings, or whether it's online groups, or whether it's one-to-one, or whether it's to support your family, it doesn't matter what the help is, as long as it suits your recovery. That's all that matters. And that will help you stay sober and solidify your recovery. Anyway, until next time, Carpe Diem, seize the day today. Much love to you all. Bye-bye.